Go live. We are live.
And so should. Well within your rights. Oh my God.
Okay, everybody. We are now live. Welcome everyone to the October 10 infrastructure meeting today. There are no apologies, and we had a public forum before in Darren's meeting in the community wellbeing, and the issues raised by Mr. West will be discussed in the activities report later on in this agenda. So we actually have a plethora of items today. We have elderly housing, LTP assumptions, temporary road closures, council-owned property land disposal, Three Waters update, and the activities report. So first we'll start though with the minutes of the infrastructure committee meeting held 5 September. Can I have someone say the term correct? Thank you, Alex. Moved, seconded, Grant. Put that, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against? That's carried.
I've been put in here as being in attendance. I'm actually on this committee.
No, it hasn't been.
Declare.
The governance statement has not. There has been no change to that. The governance statement was updated at the last meeting. I believe there was a request to put you on, but it wasn't in time for that meeting. It was the end of the September meeting that was done.
Right, okay. And that's been updated?
Yes.
Yep, okay. Thank you. Right, now we'll go to the minutes of the Waste Advisory Group held on the 11th September. Now I can put those. Barry, do you want to second that?
Yep.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Yeah, that is carried. Now we move on to elderly persons housing and the policies. Speaking to that is Rhiannon.
Kia ora.
The floor is yours.
So with me today also have Hannah, who's done a lot of work on the policy, and Heather from the infrastructure team, so we can answer any questions. So we've been working on this elderly persons housing policy essentially to codify the existing practice. There has been the tenant information booklet that you'll also note that's attached to this report that's been provided to all of the existing tenants. We've also undertaken a pre-engagement meeting and hui as part of the process for developing this policy. That was held at Age Concern a few weeks ago. The Mayor was in attendance at that hui as well. Essentially, this policy is intended for the existing elderly persons housing activity that council runs. It doesn't relate to any new projects that might be run in the future, and it doesn't affect tenants that are already in the facility. It is about or some elements relate I'm going to start again. Those elements where there is a change will only relate to new tenants. There aren't actually many changes from current practice, but there are a few areas, and that will relate to new tenants. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Right, I'm going to open up. Tom?
Chair, I have 3 questions. Put them quickly if you wish me to. The first one is, I'm looking at the housing policy now, and I note that included in assets is prepaid funeral accounts, which seem to me to be pretty difficult to classify as an asset. I wondered why that was included in there. I mean, you cannot access it.
So through you, Chair, yes, prepaid funeral accounts, while they are basically paid to either council in terms of paying off a plot or in terms of paid to a funeral director, they're basically monies held until you die. So they can still be recovered at any time. So they're still an asset in terms of that.
Okay. Second one, I noticed that we are changing the policy so that someone can move up and down the waiting list depending on the circumstances, presumably of them, but also of other people coming onto the waiting list who might move above them. So in other words, you have to satisfy certain criteria to get on the waiting list. But once you're on the waiting list, then you might get to number 5 but you get bumped down to number 10 or something because, and 2 questions. I wondered whether there was fundamental fairness in that. But my second question, and probably this is the main one, is there more than one person involved in that decision? A decision to move somebody down the waiting list, it would seem to me, would be something where you would require at least sort of one-up approval.
Again, through you, Chair, it would be unusual for us to change where someone sits in the waiting list. The opportunity for the change to the waiting list would be in the very rare occasion we would have someone who urgently required accommodation that we might want to put in at the top. In terms of who makes decision, it's a staff decision and then elevated to management.
So it's not an individual person's decision, because it does give a variety of reasons why somebody can be moved down the list.
In this case, it would be elevated to management because it would be a senior management.
So my third question, Chair, is under the allocation of rental units paragraph headed allocation of rental units, it says the applicant has only 2 days to decide whether to accept a unit or not. Which seemed to me to be, a bit difficult. If you're an elderly person and somebody calls you day 1, you got to make a decision by day 3. I mean, this is probably a view I would express rather than a question. It just seems to me to be very, very tight timing. And why do we not give them 5 days or something, or a week or something? That just seems more reasonable to me.
And that's a fair comment. And we could amend the policy to reflect a different time frame if council just determined that to be the case.
Just on that, I think if you are on the waiting list, it means that you are ready to go, and if you would take yourself off at any stage. So if it needs looked at.
As a particular house, so that's the point. You get offered a particular house.
Okay. Right, we've got Alan, and then okay.
Mine's not so much a question; it's a compliment, actually. I just think that I've never seen such a well-written little booklet as that tenant information booklet. It's just so well written. It's got all the stuff that you need to know in an easy to understand format. It's one of the best things I've ever seen written, to be fair. Perfect.
There we go. Rhea.
Yeah, I definitely support that. I just want to come back to where Tom was kind of going towards changing circumstances. And I've looked at the sentence where it says, where an existing tenant is no longer able to live independently, council will work with the tenant and their whānau or next of kin as appropriate to help them find more suitable accommodation. If they can't live independently, it's either a medical reason or a capacity reason, right? Is that where this is?
Through you, Chair, yes, that is the case.
Because if that's the case, then they need to either go into an appropriate rest home or a medical rest home, and they're not available for at least 20 plus days. So what do you intend to do with the tenant while they're trying to find where they can go?
So I'll probably pass this back to Heather as well, but the point is you can't just and there's no desire to force someone out of their accommodation because their circumstances change. It's usually an evolving situation, and as I understand it, and again, I'm sure Heather will speak to this, but this is something that does arise, unfortunately, with this particular group of people. It is managed very well at the moment by the housing team, and they're aware of managing that process and making it happen. No one's going to be forced out quickly. It's a conversation, and it's about facilitating those options. Again, as has been raised elsewhere in the report, there is a chronic shortage of all of that type of accommodation. Again, there is no ability, legally speaking, to evict someone from their house. We wouldn't want to do that either. So again, that doesn't change things, but it's something that we're aware of. It's probably a problem that honestly is only going to increase with time. So hence flagging it now. I don't know if you had anything else to add to that, but no.
Right, Evelyn.
Yes, I too would like to comment on the excellence of the brochure part, but I have a couple of questions. One is the fact that we're expecting people coming in to provide carpets and curtains. given that some people come into or apply for accommodation because they are in a particularly needy situation, is that realistic, or do they have the option of taking over previous tenants' fixtures and fittings? I ask this because it's less common than it used to be asked to provide curtains and carpets when you go into accommodation these days.
So through you, Chair, generally speaking, what happens is the existing tenant who's moved out would leave their carpets or drapes, not carpets, because carpets are a fixed floor covering and they're covered by council, drapes or curtains in the unit. If there is no intention for them to leave them as such, then we would provide some assistance or help a tenant to find a reasonable material carpet to, oh, not carpet, why am I thinking carpet? Sorry, curtain or drapes to replace the ones that are there.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, because I felt a little bit uncomfortable that we might be expecting people to do something that they might be a bit challenged to do. The other thing was the in the information that we provide the tenants, and it's sort of a little bit in line with Councillor Campbell's question about the amount of time that you have to make the decision. We're just going through this process too, and it was recommended to us that we encourage people to get independent advice and from Age Concern and Southern Community Law and places like that that provide it at no cost, so that people can actually afford to get the advice, but actually encourage them to do it, because in actual fact, not everybody who is going to come in is going to necessarily understand the complexities of what they're agreeing to. Are we going to follow up that suggestion as well, and include that in what we encourage people to do before they sign a lease with us?
Through you, Chair, yes, we could add that to the policy, to the procedure. It's good advice for them. We, generally speaking, when they come in to sign up, they have someone with them, so they could quite easily take independent legal advice either from the community law, or they could go to Age Concern or any of those other organisations to assist. We certainly encourage people who are signing up to have someone with them at the time, so we can just put that into the policy or the procedure as part of the process.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Just on section 4, that there seems to be a bit of a ban on dogs, and I just wonder whether that's consistent with the Southern District Council. I think they may be open to some dogs, given that small lap dogs are quite a bit of company for older people that are by themselves. I know if you open it up, it's a bit of a slippery slide about whether you have an Alsatian or a Rottweiler versus something much smaller than that. But I just wonder whether that's consistent with what our neighbouring council's got, and whether there's some potential for an ageing person to have a small dog that they might be quite attached to.
So I can confirm that in some instances the Southern District Council does allow dogs. They are quite specific about the type of dog and the age. So the dog has to have been with the family for a certain period of time. Prior to developing the policy, we've done quite a bit of extensive research around whether dogs are appropriate in our housing space. There's limited space for them to be able to exercise their dog off a leash inside the complexes without disturbing any of the other tenants. It's unfair, I believe, to have a dog inside all the time. So they have to have some outdoor space, and it's very difficult for the way our units are set up to have a specific outdoor space for them to do that. It's also difficult to manage noise control for a dog that might be disturbing the neighbours as well.
I think the district approach is different to that. they don't have secluded areas for dogs to run around in. They just expect the tenants to be able to get out and walk their dogs on a lead and then bring them back. That's okay. I understand this is not an easy one to approach.
Rihanna.
I think it's worth noting that this policy is codifying existing practice. Existing practice does not allow dogs of any kind. We are correcting that to allow for disability assistance dogs, which is important just to be clear that that should be allowed. And obviously we are balancing up all of the interests and needs of the tenants with maintenance requirements. So in fact, this policy as it stands will allow a greater access for dogs than is currently the procedure.
Thank you.
Right, okay, any further questions or comments? If not, Peter, you on the list? Oh no, sorry.
No, I'm not on the list. Thank you. I've had a quick look through the agreements here for the elderly housing. I can't find anything where the tenants aren't allowed to operate a small business out of there. Is there anything there that I've missed?
What sort of small business?
We haven't had that issue come up at all during either the engagement or the policy preparation stage.
It's strange because we had a large business being operated out of one of Alstonlea a few years back, but we'll just leave it at that.
That's
Thank you.
A few years ago, not just recently.
Well, a few years back. Time flies when you're getting older.
I'll take that under advisement.
Right, okay, so we've got some 3 recommendations here. We received the report.
You're right, Alex.
We note the tenant information booklet and recommend to council that it adopt the elderly persons housing policy as it is, but are we going to have some alterations that when it comes to council at the end of the month that will be identified?
So based on the basis of this conversation, my understanding is we're going to increase the notice period for decisions from 2 days to 5 days.
Right, and nothing with the dogs, stay as is? I think as is consistent. I'm a dog lover and I know the problems they can create, and I think you've got to err on the side of caution, sorry, except for a disability related service dog. Yeah. Thank you. So everyone's happy with that?
No, I'm with that.
Okay, so can I have someone move those 3? Thanks, Pania. Seconded, Rhea. Put those. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, that is carried. Thank you, ladies. We go now to LTP assumptions. I watched a movie that said the assumptions were something to do with the mother or something. But so Rhiannon back again with the assumptions.
Kia ora, councillors. So the Risk and Assurance Committee has received and discussed these draft assumptions from a risk perspective. This report allows the Infrastructure Committee to consider those assumptions that relate specifically to infrastructure. So this report focuses on those elements and brings some additional information forward for the committee to consider. I will just note from the conversation this morning in the workshop with Emergency Management Southland, just as this report indicates, we are waiting for advice from Environment Southland as to proposed assumptions around managing of emergency and disaster situations. So that is something that we will bring back again to the Risk and Assurance Committee. So basically in this report I've just tried to pull out the main things that will be of interest to this committee. I am happy to go through them or just to take questions, whatever's your preference, Chair.
No, I think we do that. They're quite comprehensive, and I imagine that all assumptions are evidence-based, so there is evidence behind each one. So I'm going to open up the committee now for questions, comments. Mr. Mayor.
Just an observation on some of the facts that are here. So on page 2 of the report, on page 46 of board books, right down near the bottom it says economic diversification, and it lists a few industries there that are less likely to bring significant employment growth. I'm not sure about that. Green hydrogen has a potential for 2,000 workers when the plant's being constructed, and about 200 workers once it's operational. Certainly estimates that I've seen around the aquaculture area is that there's somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 jobs involved across 3 salmon farms and some other aquaculture investments in Bluff itself, around the old freezing works. So not sure that that's less than likely, I guess is what I'm saying. And a bit further over on the following page, one of the things that seems to be missing in the whole list is that there's no mention of the sale of property or other assets that we have in our headwinds. So we've got 16 properties or plots to be disposed of, and we've got a recent list of, I'm not sure how many it was, but it's in one of these reports about the disposal of some council-owned options later in the agenda, which again are quite significant value-wise. 40–50 million dollars worth potentially.
Rhiannon, do you think, I don't think they would be applied as an assumption. That's something that happens. And why these assumptions are here, I can see you need that background for the LTP. Yeah, that's my view. You want to comment on that?
I think that's correct, Chair, in terms of the sale of any particular assets would be something that would flow through into the budget forecasting itself rather than as an assumption as such. The Finance and Projects Committee will receive a similar paper on the financial assumptions, and that's where such a matter might be dealt with, but it wouldn't come through as an assumption, it would come through as a budget matter.
Grant.
Yeah, just page 4 or 5 of the report.
Microphone, please. Microphone.
Oh, sorry. Page 4 or 5 of the report around asset life and conditions. We had a discussion a while back about how we make really informed decisions around that, and using data and technology to be able to make really informed decisions as opposed to just depreciation or renewals approach. Is there any progress on that, or where are we?
On the infrastructure assets?
Yeah.
Erin, would you like to comment on that? Thank you.
Yes, happy to speak to that, and Russell may wish to pipe in as well. Look, agree, you can make more appropriate decisions and I guess sweat your assets further if you've got more information about them as opposed to just working on an average asset life. We are making steps to improve our asset data. So, for example, our wastewater network, we've now got quite a significant process for CCTVing those lines, so we can actually get condition assessments of how they're going as they approach that end of life and make decisions around whether or not we can extend the asset life. Unfortunately, it's not as easy with water pipes that are under pressure. But honestly, it's one of those things where we're wanting to continue to keep up with technology and improve our asset data and asset management. But that also comes with some costs associated with that front end piece as well. And Russell and I have worked on putting some additional budget into the long-term plan around how we use that technology and analysis better to be able to look at those asset lives and push those as hard as we can, rather than just using the generic asset life. Russell, did you have anything to add?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Every 3 years we revalue our assets, and during that time we have an independent valuer assess both the quantum and things like the asset lives against national standards. So I guess that's another opportunity that we take to actually assess. So any of our assets that will be at the end of the life, we add extra asset life on. So we may have assets that are actually longer than the standard default age anyway. So we continue to monitor that and look to extend them as far as that is sensible and reasonable, that we can convince both our independent peer reviewer and audit.
Yeah, because I know in Christchurch, for example, through AWS, they're monitoring how their infrastructure responds to small quakes live, and so they can understand what's happening on those different bits of infrastructure. And so there's a technology solution to this, and it's not just an Invercargill City issue; it's a whole Infrastructure New Zealand local authority issue.
But I think that pipe inspection, as Erin mentioned, is very good, and what Russell is saying about we're not sweating our assets, but we're being sensible about their life.
So you're comfortable we're getting as accurate information as possible about our assets?
I think that there's technology is evolving, and we can always be better. And as an industry, honestly, we're not as an industry where we would like to be in terms of best for asset all the time. What I would say though is because of the continued investment that Invercargill City has made in renewing its assets at a reasonable time, I think a lot of councils are probably leaning more into technology than we have, because they are looking to have to make some pretty tough decisions around pushing their assets quite hard, simply because they don't have the money to invest in them. We don't have as big a backlog of infrastructure deficit, which means that we are we aren't pushing our assets as hard as some other areas are, and therefore we're not investing as hard in that technology. But it's something that we need to get the balance right to make sure that we're not investing in assets too early.
Thanks, Grant. Further questions? Tom?
Chair, I think these are excellent central estimates, let's call it that way, for assumptions. But some of them have got quite a large range associated with them, and the question arises how we plan for the sort of range of possible outcomes rather than just a single point outcome. So as a question for staff, if you look at something like climate change comes to mind, and the possible range of temperature outcomes from half a degree to 3 degrees, well, pretty big difference. Maybe that's one of the most obvious, but you got to wait 70 years to get to that point. But anyway, there's a number of areas where there is a range, and I just wonder whether we actually are planning with the intention of recognising the fact that we don't actually know the outcome. We're just choosing a central estimate and allowing for the fact that there's a range of possible outcomes.
Do you want to talk about that, Quantum?
Yeah, so I think again it's similar to the question, to rather than the response that Erin provided to the last question, that you've got to balance up the investment that you make in your assumptions and your scenario planning against the benefit in terms of the outcome. We're taking the median range, for example, on climate change, and as best as possible designing, for example, our stormwater pipes for that increased scenario. Each LTP cycle gives an opportunity to review, and there may be certain aspects that next LTP round, for example, we would look at particular scenarios and invest more. This LTP round, the focus has been on the scenarios around Three Waters and what will happen in terms of retaining Three Waters or not retaining Three Waters. And so that by necessity in the infrastructure space has been an area of focus, but certainly more range of scenarios could be something looked at for future LTPs.
Thank you, Rhiannon. Right, we've got some 2 recommendations. We received the report and note and provide feedback on the items relevant to infrastructure included in the draft assumptions for the LTP. Can I have someone move that, please? Moved Evelyn, seconded Leslie. I'm going to put that. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? That is carried. Thank you. That moves on now to temporary road closures. And Russell, you're already seated.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. This is part of our normal process, I guess, this time of year for the Tour of Southland. The Tour of Southland obviously is one of our premier events for Southland, and this requires us to temporarily stop some of the roads around Queen's Park on 2 days that everybody's generally aware of in Southland. It's typically well controlled and well managed, and seems to operate reasonably seamlessly. So I'm happy to receive questions.
Right, questions? Anyone? Pretty straightforward.
Move the recommendation.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. I'll put that. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? That is carried. That is all 3 recommendations there. Great. Okay, that moves on now to disposal of infrastructural land. Right, who is speaking to this?
Heather and I are, but Heather's disappeared somewhere. We'll just find her.
Right, we'll wait till Heather gets back. Paging Heather. Yeah.
No, Russell, it's all yours.
Right, welcome Heather. Do you want to talk us, introduce the method behind the madness?
So this is a follow-on from the workshop in terms of land disposal that was carried out earlier this year, and you've already received some land disposal proposals through Parks and Recreation through the for a previous report. This land is specifically mostly infrastructure land, and the report details some parcels of land that staff have identified as being suitable for either repurpose or disposal, and what staff determined their strategic value for them to be, and whether that aligns with council's strategic assessment is yet to be determined. Russell has some further information that might be of assistance in that regard, specifically in relation to the car parking spaces.
So what we really were trying to do is try to align how strongly they are strategically and how needed they are in the future. And I guess that's the key starting point that we were suggesting is for our infrastructure land is, do we need it for the future and how does it align? So rather than seek disposal earlier, then in 5 years' time we come back and need a piece of land. So what we've tried to prepare is the paper and rank some of those. In terms of some of the car parks, we've highlighted a range of those, I guess, open spaces that have opportunities, and sometimes the opportunity for car parking might not be the strategic purpose going forward. So I guess that's what we've tried to incorporate into that table, and we're happy to receive some questions on it.
Just one question before I go to Darren is that we were hoping to get revenue back on those, say the 131S Street, the return we actually are getting from car parking. Do we have that?
Yes, we have crunched some numbers.
Yep, just to give the committee.
So revenue from 131S Street is estimated 78,000 per annum.
Per annum, 78. Wow.
Yeah.
Less than 10%.
Yep,
just under 10% revenue return. And for 116S 30 Deveron Street, 26,000, which is a 2.9% return.
Right.
And for 1111 Street, it's 216,000, which is a 3.3% return.
Right. Okay, thanks. Right, Darren, sorry, question.
Thanks. I guess my questions are around the car parking spaces and whether or not they're not being used. If they're not being used, then maybe there's an issue. But 11th Street, for example, I inquired about getting a space there last year and was told there was a several months waiting list. It might be that if the return on 11th Street is, if it's at 3%, then maybe it's a good jog to look at hiking the rates. But if the car parks aren't empty, I can't say that I'm tremendously supportive of not having them there. We almost lost 131S a couple of years ago because I think Ministry of Justice were looking at relocating the courts there. But it's just those people who are looking for paid permanent parking or semi-permanent parking close to town. There aren't as many options, bearing in mind that there are 700 car parks that have just opened up in Invercargill Central. That's not everybody's cup of tea either.
Right, thanks. Trish?
I'd just like to draw your attention, which I'm sure you know, is that the Ministry of Education is moving into Spade Street, and they have they have 12 cars that they bring with them, work cars, which they've probably got parking for, I'm not sure, but there's probably 45 to 50 staff will be based in there, so they'll need car parking. Just something you might like to think about.
Tom?
I mean, I don't suppose we're going to work through them one at a time, but I will just comment that to me, 131 S Street is the perfect location for in-town apartments.
Yeah.
And I don't think that it would make any sense at all to be getting rid of that for 790,000.
Yeah, so you actually prompted me there, Tom. So what we'll do is we'll actually weed some out so we can actually talk about. There's a couple of ones. So 11 Street, the one by the library, I think, does everyone agree that we should keep that, retain that?
Yes.
Unless anyone wants to. Okay, so we'll just note that. Then we'll go to 131 S Street. I think we've just talked about that. It's very strategic for either development or retaining. So,
Mr. Chair, can I be recorded as not commenting on 131
okay, because of the
potential conflict of interest?
Leslie?
Can I just ask Mr. Chair about 116 Esk Street and just how used is 116 Esk Street, 30 Devon Street? I know about the Devon Street bit, I'm just not sure about the 116 East Street bit.
So that site is, I guess, the building that's next to the Scottish Hall, and it extends around into Devon Street and the Scottish Hall. The building looked to be demolished, but we never demolished it. So that could certainly be a site that could be disposed of, and the car parking in 30 Devon Street is well utilised, as we work pretty hard to create leases on them all to get as much revenue as we can.
Yes, you can see 30 Devon Street is well used, but 116 East Street looks to me like it's a vacant building.
That's correct. It does have some materials that we've stored in it, but we can't store too many vehicles because of the some of our building regulations.
Thank you.
Sorry, Darren, was it you next?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm not hugely opposed to the disposal of 131 Esk Street, but I would flag that a potential issue around tenants on those sites is a reverse sensitivity one, because there are light industries on the other side of the road, and they were there first, rather than somebody having their daytime snooze interrupted by a panel beater.
So with the Devon Street / East Street one, are they two separate titles, or is that all one?
They're currently held as Mr. Chair is one title.
Right.
But potentially they could be separated, but at the moment they are one title.
So the building could be sold, and the
back bit
car park
would need a subdivision to occur, and it would create some cost in it.
Okay, Leslie?
Can I just point out that site, particularly the 116 East Street, could also be said to be an ideal apartment area.
Under what Tom was talking about?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Look, I'm going to next, Peter, and then I'm going to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've already got my answer. Mr. Pearson answered.
Okay, so I'm gonna just group 131 Esk and the Devon 116 S together. I actually move that we actually hold on to them at the moment for the various reasons people talked about, either car parking or housing.
Sorry, Bree's just got a really question.
Sorry.
I just want to ask for some clarification. So the property 131 S Street, I understand that if it's reclassified, then it's a first right of refusal to Ngāi Tahu because it was taken under the Public Works Act.
Correct, and we're permitted to use it for car parking purposes. For any other purposes, we are obliged to negotiate with Ngāi Tahu.
Right.
Yeah, so I think the status quo is working. Alex?
I've just got a clarification there, Chair. You said 131 and 116 to be retained for potential future purposes, including housing. Are you meaning
potentially.
Yeah, potentially. Are you meaning us to put housing there?
Oh, no. I think that, Tom, you meant I think you didn't mean us doing it, but the ability. It could be a developer maybe want to do that.
Yeah, well, in that case,
preference, I think in my mind was the elderly housing.
Elderly housing.
I mean, if you take the case of the fact that that Ngāi Tahu is so, it doesn't make any difference who does it actually.
Yeah.
You know, building apartments in the city would be, I think, a very welcome thing.
Yep. Is that okay? Or
I agree. Just to extend to that, so why would we not dispose of it? So for that purpose, then.
But we haven't. We I guess Heather, we can't. If we dispose of it, we can't say it's for that purpose.
No, well, we know that, but I guess what I'm cautioning us, or maybe not cautioning us, but querying, sorry, is that if we decide now not to dispose of it for potentially those reasons, this can't come up again for another 6 months, because then we'd be relitigating a decision we've already made not to dispose of this piece of land. So if we had a developer come, hey, yay, you were talking about potentially putting housing there, and that looks like what you'd be excited about doing, we can't make that decision again.
Are we locked in for 6 months? I mean, we can actually put the decision on hold. We can actually we don't actually have to. We can withdraw those. Is that right?
Yep. So, Mr. Chair, in terms of the 6 months, so there is a prohibition on relitigating once a motion has been made, unless there is a notice of motion signed by, I think, 75% of councillors to reconsider that decision. So it is possible to change that decision in the event that it is a developer comes along, but it's not good practice.
It is not good practice. So I guess I'm just highlighting that whatever decision we make now, you can't rewrite out of it in 6 months' time without 75% of us all deciding on the dotted line.
Sorry?
You still have to go to night.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yes. So before I go to the Mayor, I'm going to ask
No, I
Erin.
was meaning more for 116 rather than 131.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to clarify, I think, along the lines of Councillor Campbell's point, which is just that was the piece of land where if we were able to get central government funding to fast track building elderly housing, which would be done by council, that was the piece of land that we identified as being the quickest path to be able to move forward with the development and essentially be shovel ready as quickly as possible. So from that housing perspective, if we were looking to, we've discussed, that potential of whether we wanted to build significantly more elderly housing, that would be a key piece of land at the moment, just in terms of our ability to do that quickly. There are a number of other pieces of land available, but because they have reserve status, they would take longer to make shovel ready.
Right, so that this decision to not put it on the market right now wouldn't prohibit that, not at all. No. No. Okay, you happy, Alex, or are you still?
I think in that case, would you, Chair, be more comfortable taking them separately?
Yeah, I'll take them separately. So we'll go for 131 first. Everyone's happy to retain that for the various reasons. Oh, sorry, Mr.
Just wanted to clarify the incumbents that's on the title. So it says there that we have a right to use it for a car park. If we decided to use it for housing, council decided to use the housing, what's the position with the Naitahu Claims Settlement Act?
So Heather, please correct me if I'm incorrect, but it would essentially, we would require Naitahu approval to change the status. That's correct, Heather. And on the basis that a number of our discussions have been had around progressing elderly housing, potentially in partnership with Naitahu, we wouldn't expect that to be a likely hindrance to that work.
Thank you.
Okay, so 131 up for discussion. You just show of hands. You're all okay? Not to sell out? Cool. Rightio.
And noting my
noted.
Yep, you noted. And so 11630, keen to keep that as well. Yeah.
Yes. For the moment.
For the moment, yeah. I mean, 6 months is quite a short time in this world. Okay. That moves us on to some couple of big ones, and that is 313 Bay Road.
So we dealt with Lebanon Street.
Yeah, we did.
I think we did. Lebanon Street. We're keeping the library car park. So Heather, the big hunk of grass.
So that's literally what it is. It's a rural piece of land which is being leased. can be sold with the perpetual lease in place, or the lessee may make an offer to purchase if we wish to do so.
Okay, so it is returning us, how much again was it returning?
Very low income on that. It's only got the income on that is only 2,750.
Right.
Because it's a land, and it's a 21-year lease, so the rental would have been quite some time ago.
I've got a buyer over here.
Sorry, Evelyn. Sorry, everyone quiet.
Just a question regarding whether this piece of land has any relevance to our climate change resilience going forward, given that where it actually is located is one of the principal flood zones. So if we look at what its potential future is as a farm may not be that great, which is why we're not getting a high return off it at the moment, I presume. Is this a piece of land that council itself could put to use in terms of future-proofing some of our infrastructure nearer to the city? And I ask this genuinely because I don't know the answer, but I suspect that some people have looked at it.
Darren.
So from a district plan perspective, no, because of the fact that it's in an inundation zone, and it's in a rural zone.
Yes.
So that would sit on the limb if you were looking to exit it. Really, it's appropriate for rural activity, not much else.
Yep.
You wouldn't create a subdivision on it, and anybody who was entering into it would know that if there's a big rainfall, there's a good chance that you'll have a great pond.
And hence my question, because we could proactively manage it if we were so inclined.
I'm not sure what we would put on it.
Trees.
No, so any other comments about this? Because I'm going to put this one up.
Just what?
Erin?
I think I understand what Evelyn's meaning in terms of, look, the land was originally earmarked by the infrastructure team to do land-based drainage of the area. It's one that we've been chewing around for a little while, going, actually, do we think that it is the piece of land to do that on? And what we've decided is that no, we don't believe that is the right piece of land for us to hold for that purpose.
Right, can I have Peter?
Yeah, all I want to know, please, what's the hectares?
23 hectares. 23 hectares.
23, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to ask for someone to move that we sell it.
I was going to ask a question.
Yeah, ask a question. Yeah.
What's about the previous one about the car park? Why did we decide we're not selling that?
Which car park?
The Leven Street car park.
Leven Street.
I think everyone realised that it was a good asset to have, and it returned.
So what's the return on it?
2.9%.
There was a comment that Councillor Ludlow made that it may need to be increased.
No, that was on.
But that's a separate thing.
No, that was on East Street. 116.
Is this Leven Street?
So- Yes.
3.3.
3.3%.
Yeah.
So it's under the cost of capital and we're going to hold it.
Yes.
We need the car parking.
And it's used. So just to satisfy return, when do we revise parking charges?
Every year.
Every year.
So that can happen.
Well, the better question
As part of our fees and charges reviews.
What a parking costs need to rise to make a capital return on it? Because we're making 7 or 8% down here.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that's if that valuation of the site is correct. So, yeah, Russell.
So, Mr. Chair, what we've done there is we've estimated the value of the car park based on the value of the site, because the way the valuation record is held holds both the car park and the library in one title. So we could come back with a revisit of what the valuation of the car park building alone would be. What we do know over the last few years is that the public usage of the car park decreased quite rapidly. So we've gone the opposite way, and we have the building about 75% leased now as a facility. And to be fair, we've only got 2 decks where we have public access there anyway, and it's quite possible we should revisit to 1 to increase the return on that car park. So it is well utilised, and as Councillor Ludlow pointed out, we have, I guess, a varying waiting list at times for that, and it is one of the, I guess, better access points. Undercover parking right close to your CBD is actually quite an advantage. So I think we just might need to revisit the valuation, which I think could impact the rate of return. So.
Right, is that?
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so 313 Bay Road. We happy to put that on the market? Someone like to move that? Rhea, seconded Tom. Okay, so that's good. We take that one off. Keep. That takes us to the big one in Bond Street. 141. I think there's a bit of history or story with this.
Yes, Mr. Chair, this was the original works development yard, and has been in council for a period of time. When bond contracts moved out, it's been vacant for a period of time. One of the things that are probably a little bit, I guess, why we've moved it to a medium priority is that it is one of the vacant pieces of land in that area, and Waka Kotahi have now indicated that councils can own passenger transport infrastructure, so they can own a yard and actually install their own infrastructure for EV type technology. So in the past, councils weren't allowed to own that, but some of the more recent changes. So that would be one of the last larger pieces of land. If and when we go to market for a passenger transport service provider, it could be a strategic advantage that you actually use that for other purposes. You could actually own yourself a depot, is what I'm saying. But it's something that you may wish to consider as part of the longer term process. That's why it's moved from, I guess, low priority for no other purpose of council to a medium priority.
Okay, so you potentially could be advising us that strategically and maybe worth holding on to. Is that right?
That is one of the only larger pieces of land close in. At this stage, it's unknown whether that would be in council's best interest until you actually had a conversation with the PT industry.
Okay, as far as a purchaser looking to buy the land and build and develop it, are there restrictions with its hazardous, what's underneath?
Mr. Chair, I believe most of Bond Street and most of Mersey Street have some form of land contamination on them anyway. They all have different foundations, so I don't think that piece of land is any different from any of the other areas where buildings have been built recently.
Okay, Tom.
Gerard, I was going to say that it doesn't seem to me to be sensible to hold on to it if there is if there is perhaps a purchaser who'd establish a business there, create jobs, and so forth. So I think holding on to it in the off chance, given it's a good site, it's a big site, I don't think makes sense. So I personally would favour marketing it.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Anyone? Okay, we'll test the water on 141 Bond Street. All those in favour of disposing it, can you please put your hand up? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, that's a yes. Okay, it's a release on 141, and takes us to the last one, which we've still got. I'll go back to 116 Esk and 30 Devron. So that's bare land plus an old building that's earthquake prone building. Is that right? Oh, we've done that. I just didn't see.
Gary Crescent found one.
Oh, it drops down one. Sorry. And now we are doing 48 Glengarry Crescent. 40A.
40 what, sorry?
Substation site.
It seems a strange piece of land that we don't have a lot of use for, except there's a substation on it.
Okay, so it's speed through this. Anyone keen to dispose? Yeah, do that. Okay, show of hands to dispose of 48 Glengarry. Yep. Okay, that's a release as well. And
Chair, we do need to know whether PowerNet can actually move that equipment, and where they would move it to, because it presumably services the houses around about it.
Mr. Chair, we've had several conversations with Powernet over the last decade about whether there are opportunities as the network's upgraded, whether we could release that land and actually turn it into a sellable site. But at this stage, we haven't been able to find an economic solution where they would move their equipment. They may well wish to take ownership and contribute significantly to us, perhaps. The site's only got a transformer on it, and it's a gravel site, and it's an unusual piece of land that we've somehow created over a long period of time.
So if it was owned by, if someone bought it, would it be detrimental to Powernet, a new owner?
No, it's got easements on it for accessing to and from, so typically it'd be quite difficult to build anything on the site. So it'll be an interesting sale.
Okay.
Whom would be interested?
Right, so that we've got that all done now. The recommendations. You will? Okay.
They just pay rent. Just pay rent.
So does it have services?
Right, I'm going to put the 1, 2, 3 recommendations there. Move that. Rhea seconded. Who's going to second that? Grant. Okay. So we've got the whole 6 of those statements there. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you for that. Takes us to Three Waters Reform Program update.
I'll be covering that one.
Yeah. Okay. Nothing's happening, so we'll move on to the next one. You want to?
Sorry, Andrew wasn't available today, so I'll be covering that one. Look, as Councillor Pottinger has alluded to, we are in a bit of a holding period at the moment on water reform pending the outcome of the election. Probably the key piece that I'd just draw your attention to is should Labor's plan to proceed with the 10 entity model go ahead, we have been provided our draft date to transition towards the new entity, and that's currently proposed to be 1 October 2025. That is a date that probably hasn't won a lot of support from the Otago and Southland councils. As you'll be aware, most of the other Otago Southland councils had supported a date of 1 July 2025 to coincide with the end of the financial year. They weren't very happy with an October date, and in particular concerns around that overlapping with the local body elections and the fact that is already quite a busy time were not favoured by chief executives around Otago Southland. So that's been fed back into the entity, and we'll await the outcome of the election and whether or not there's any change in that space.
Right, are there any questions? Otherwise I'll move that it be received, the report. Any questions?
I'll second.
You second it? Okay, put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against? That's carried. Takes us to the activities report. I'll just jump in. Russell, if you get a brief minute to come and talk to us about, I spoke to Russell earlier about Vic West's traffic crossing signal stuff, and Russell's going to give us a bit of a history and what we can do.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Without hearing what Vic had said, certainly we have two intersections being St Andrew Street, Queen's Drive, and Gala Street, Queen's Drive, where we've got two different controllers for the pedestrian phase. They were, I guess, one-off type installations that were to a certain degree trialled but have remained there as the controllers. So it's a situation where you can hold the button and what it does is it extends the pedestrian phase. And I guess that was trialled a little bit to see whether there was some uptake here in Invercargill or across the country, because the units that are built were customised. The difficulty we'll have is that they do have the external speakers, and I guess it's depending on the voice quality. And I wasn't aware that the voice quality was degrading, but I can certainly go and try it. And actually, if it has degraded, we could look at upgrading some of those units. To my understanding, the main, I guess, controller piece for it still is quite operational. So we should be able to improve it.
So you were saying to me before that the uptake hasn't been around the country as strong.
No, I don't know of anywhere else. I'm not aware of anywhere else across the country where it's been that technology's been installed.
Was it contemplated at all for our inner city? So.
Typically, what's said across the country is you have a standard pedestrian, I guess, travel speed that you allow for. And that was really because of some of our wide streets, particularly in that location going to the park. It was really a trial to see whether or not we could come up with something cleverer. But it needed some other, I guess, customised pieces, and that hasn't been the piece that has gone very well across the rest of the country.
Okay, Darren.
It's immediately adjacent. Well, one of them is immediately adjacent, and the other's not far away from blind citizens' rooms that they lease from us at Queen's Park. So I'm guessing that they've placed a value on it, and I'm encouraged to hear that Russell can have a look and see if there's some equipment we can replace and upgrade with. What I'm more concerned about is there was a request for service lodged, and it vanished.
Can you remember how long ago Vic lodged that?
Well, Vic said he's lodged several over a couple of years when he was in the public forum this afternoon.
Yeah.
I can't quantify that. He says that, but I'll take him at his word.
Mr. Chair, it could well be that he said that they're not working very well, but the buttons work fine, but perhaps they've accepted the audio was working, so I can go and check that out. The technology just needs to be, yes, it's in quite a vulnerable place with the weather, so it is actually a little bit, it's one of those setups that we struggle to maintain.
I might take the opportunity to come down with you and have a look and listen.
You will respond to him.
Stop. Look and listen.
I can certainly go back to Mr. West as well.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. Right, the rest of the activity report. Does anyone want to speak to it, or?
Probably two pieces I'd just draw attention to is the WasteNet approving or endorsing the staff approval of the transfer of the regional waste services contract from Bond Contracting to Wasteco. So you'll start to see some comms out about the place around that change, and some over time differently branded vehicles starting to complete that collection. The other piece was in relation to the weather event that we had. From an infrastructure perspective, in addition to the high call volume that we were having, we also took the opportunity to stand up our incident response team here at ICC. So that response team operated out of the second floor of the building and fed into the emergency operations centre that was managed by out of Environment Southland. It was one where I think there's a number of people in the building who have had quite a bit of experience at doing this, but it was a first time for a number of people as well. So it was a really nice opportunity to have a little bit of an event that wasn't too serious and give people a little bit of an opportunity to step into that space, see what happens. Also test our network, and there were a few places where we saw network constraints. And to Grant's point, where that information then feeds back into us, and we have a look around what we can do to try to remove those constraints going forward. In terms of the people complaining about the accumulation of debris on drains, it's something that we're very aware of when we go into weather events, particularly at that time of year, and the maintenance teams make an effort to try to keep those drains clear. But as you can imagine, once you get the rain moving, you're definitely playing a game of catch up, then trying to keep them clear, and they aren't always as clear as we'd like. The other piece I'd like to note is just it was probably one of the first events where we've had a decent test of our rain gardens in Eskendon, and was really pleased to see that area performing really well. So I sort of went up there to check it out, going, please don't let there be any water ponded around the place, but everything was coping really well, which was excellent to see.
Okay, Grant.
Yeah, thanks. Well, just firstly on that, and thanks for following that question up from earlier, Erin. For me, it's about us being really agile, because climate change is going to chuck, a number of events like, that event particularly was strong wind, then rain, and there'll be different events, you know, but the more data we gather on, okay, we get this event, how does our infrastructure respond? I think we've got to be really agile around that information, and that enables us to best cope and feeds into how we do things. So that's good to hear we're doing it. In terms of the report, great to see some action down at Bluff. So thank you for that. I know that community really values that investment. So thank you for that. In terms of the roading contract, and this was a question I raised a few months ago, how are we going to monitor and how will we see the performance against that contract? Bearing in mind it was a very significant contract we awarded, and I think certainly myself, but there was a few others in the room that wanted to see regular updates on how's that contract performing.
Yeah, so in terms of the transition, I'm sorry, I'm just having a look here. I missed that there was to be a newsletter that was prepared by the team around the transition of the new contract that was to be attached to the activities report, but it seems to have fallen off, but we'll make sure we get that distributed after the meeting, because the key thing that that's speaking about, I guess, is reinforcing, hopefully reinforcing for you that we've been pushing those priorities of council really strongly with the team, and really, you know, again around that, how we be smarter, how we be more agile, how we make sure that we look like a city that takes pride in itself and that we're spending money in the right places, and particularly how do we leverage, as Fulton Hogan is our maintenance contractor, how do we leverage the smarts that that organisation has right around the country, rather than just what people are perhaps used to seeing in Southland. So that's a message that I think is getting through loud and clear to them. What, you know, it's always going to be a work in progress. We're very clear as a team that we want to, we've got a reasonable foundation and we want to continue to get better and better and be, you know, one of the top performing networks in the country. So that's a challenge that everybody seems to be up for. What I guess I take heart from is that Bevan Sanderson, the head of asset management and engineering services for Fulton Hogan, so essentially the manager of the Brains Trust, I guess, that work within Fulton Hogan on how to do things smart, it has been allocated onto the governance group for this contract. So I think that that's a really key step for them in terms of having their really senior people from around the country involved in our contract, and already starting to see them asking questions of their own team around, have you thought about doing it this way? Are we working with that team, pushing us to do things differently than what we have done in the past?
So just secondary follow-up. So do we have a performance contract that is being monitored by both parties, and when would we see that through this committee if there is one?
So we have a contract and we've got KPIs for that contract in place. We haven't brought the individual KPIs for any of our maintenance contracts to council. So I guess if that's something that elected members are interested in, we wouldn't want to do it for one contract. It would be something we'd be wanting to do for, I guess, perhaps not all of our contracts, but all of our major contracts. Something we'd want to discuss with Michael when he's back on deck.
Yeah, well, yeah, it'd be good to see something like that, because that's a very big contract.
We do obviously have our KPIs that feed into the quarterly report, but those aren't contract specific.
Okay. And then just one more, not relating to that. In terms of the report around potholes, so someone mentioned earlier the tour of Southland. So if you go down to I think it's Devon Street and Gala Street, there's a number of potholes along there which would cause damage for bike riders that are going 70 kilometres an hour. So have we got a plan in place to get that road sorted out before the race starts, or what are we doing?
Straight to Russell about that.
I'll come to that. Just one.
So, Mr. Chair, we would go around with the contractor and the Tour of Southland people and actually have a look at our sites and make sure that all of our sites, and that includes Bluff Hill and those sorts of places, because each of those sites are quite variable. So recognise Gala Street has some pavement deterioration that we're holding off because of water mains and stuff. So it's trying to find the balance of those things. But
so that inspection's sufficient time to get the work done. Yeah.
there's always a bit of pressure, and we also just before the tour go and sweep those sites so that any I guess loose material on the roads removed to avoid damage to bike tyres.
And the second intersection, the Queen's Drive Tay Street intersection, seems to be really rough and deteriorating quite quickly. There's a number of undulations there and potholes emerging, and it's a very important arterial road, as you understand.
And it's a state highway.
It is.
And I'm happy to bring it to their attention for you.
Right, just while on the subject of potholes, and this brings in the contractor, because driving back from Sandy Point down Bay Road for 3 weeks consecutively, and the potholes were still there, and I'm thinking, well, they've got to be fixed, it's just going to happen. But I got to a point where I rang Russell and said, Russell, what do I do about these potholes, because they're not getting fixed? And they were fall in the hole type potholes. Now, you explained to me, Russell, that this contractor should be, inspecting these roads and travelling them, and obviously these should be either preventative or immediately fixed. So what's the story there?
So sorry, Chair, I've just seen Matt Keel. I know Matt spoke this morning, but I don't think I've actually formally introduced Matt to the elected members. So Matt is currently in our infrastructure operations manager role, and so he has the great job of being responsible for all of our operational maintenance contracts, including the roading contract.
Potholes.
We've found the pothole man. We're going to have some fun with that.
So, and the great thing was, those potholes were immediately fixed after Russell was aware of them.
Admittedly, Matt is only in his initial gearing up phase at council, so it's probably not the font of knowledge yet that Russell is, but we'll get him there.
So I guess my question, what went wrong? Because I rang Russell. Russell said, yes, I'm onto it straight away, and it got fixed. But our roading contractor, this shouldn't have been a problem. So who would like to talk to that? Matt, will you want to jump in? Welcome.
Over the deep end.
Through yourself, Mr. Chair. Afternoon, evening, council. From an operational perspective, a pothole on the road, obviously RFS is phoned through, contractor is mobilised to inspect the site and determine severity of the pothole. That would be then controlled by way of some temporary traffic management, and an assessment be made for when that is programmed for a repair. And there's a number of moving parts to be used to make that call. Workforce and crews out on the network in that time. Location, weather conditions. We can't repair potholes when it is wet or it's below 10 degrees due to AC sealing. So there's a few things we need to factor in. So the Bay Road location had 2 weeks of very poor weather prior to that reinstatement. It was actually a dig out that was done to repair that location.
Okay, I guess my question is purely not around the response time. It's more identifying these obvious craters that even fine weather they've been there for. Is our contractor supposed to be, or do we have to wait on public phoning us in?
A bit of both, to be fair. Yeah. So we've got cyclic crews that are in operation across our network, but they can't see every pothole that comes to fruition. So we also rely on the public to phone through. So.
Yeah,
The team goes out there and regularly monitors our arterial roads. But what I'd encourage everybody, if you see something you think's wrong, ring us, because that's obviously the first and foremost. And I guess people ring either Matt or myself or Erin and say there's a pothole. We can easily get onto that. But Councillor Pottinger is right that our contractors do need to, and we do have regular routines where they will drive the major roads, and we typically risk-based, starting on the busy roads and working our way down. So it's less usual that we would find them on the busy roads, but they are the roads that break up often very quickly, especially when it's been wet. So sometimes you can be there one day and the next day it's something small's got a bit larger. So that's why we need to know what's going on. But we want everybody who is part of our team, including our internal staff and our contractors, to be our eyes and ears. And that's what Matt's saying, is that although that we can't be everywhere all the time, we want to be able to see everything as much as we can. So it is a bit of both. But
so this gets back to our previous item on assumptions. We don't assume that it's going to be fixed. There we go. So phone it through. Any other comments, questions, Evelyn?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of things about the flood event or the things around it. So the leaf thing. I've had somebody in my ear loudly at the last 2 meetings I've been with her about Otapuni Avenue, David Street area and the leaf fall there. So it's not so much just the cleaning of the debris, which is important, but it's the fact that it seems to have been reported, but nothing has been done about the trees that are, so it's a twofold thing. Council is involved on both sides of it. There are trees there that are heavy offenders, shall we say. Is one side of our organisation able to speak to the other side of our organisation and get something done about that? Because it seems to be the eucalypt type trees and the debris that comes off those that is in the mind of this person, because I don't know, I don't drive anywhere, but it seems to be causing the problem. What can we do about it? Because it seems to be persistent and it seems to be not being resolved.
I might start with that one, and then I'm sure Russell will have something to add. It's always a balancing act, and I'm aware from my experience here, as well as my experience at other councils, that what is easiest to maintain from an infrastructure perspective is not always what is the prettiest for a city. So as much as, we've got areas where we've got some great historic trees that are the absolute bane of the existence of my Three Waters team, because those trees are constantly invading the Three Waters network, causing us blockages, breaking up our pipes. However, I don't think council would be looking for us to take some of those historic street trees out of the network. And similarly, I know how much Russell loves the cabbage trees that we have around the network from the point of view of having to keep those clear out of the curb and channel. So there's regular conversations that are going on between both teams to try to get the balance right. But absolutely, we'll always have trees causing us some degree of debris. When it becomes excessive, I guess Russell may add to this, we start putting additional pressure on the parks team around whether they are, I guess, assets that we are really wedded to keeping.
And Mr. Chair, I guess like a flood event, our team, well, Matt's team, in fact, arranged for the contractors to go out there and inspect all the floodgates that go out to through the stop banks, and that's, excuse me, the primary event that we actually prepare for. What we do know is that if it blows really hard and then it rains, we know where all the rubbish that's come from the trees are, because it's washed into the curb and channel and washed over the sump. So we know exactly where it is. We just got to go and get it. It's our problem. And I guess that's the challenge that we face. Like most cities that are fortunate to have a number of trees, that we have an ongoing issue of just having to go and pick up the stuff out of there. We do need to just keep a register of where those trees are, and if they become a nuisance, then depending on what they are, we just need to keep them at an appropriate size. If they're pine trees like in Elgin Street, which I think they are down David Street, then we just need to determine whether they are appropriate to be there, and we work closely with our parks team, and we do talk to them regularly about what can stay and what can't stay, and for the purpose of trying to manage our infrastructure so we don't destroy things, or it is actually fit for purpose. Everybody will have seen Queen's Drive the day after we've swept it, and it's blown, and every leaf in Queen's Park is sitting on Queen's Drive. It's frustrating for the team, but it's just a reality of having the luxury of trees in our city. So.
And the follow-up is that after having moaned, I now want to say something which I have said to Erin, but I need to say publicly, is how much I appreciate, as part of an organisation, the reports that we are now getting on in terms of what is happening in hydrocarbon events and events with our whausuas, all those sorts of things that are now coming through in terms of our ability to communicate environmental risk to our whānau. Really appreciate the really good communications that is happening out of the infrastructure team to do with that. And I know it's probably an extra little bit of workload, but it is much valued because we're getting the information really promptly. We're able to tell people if there is a hazard in terms of food gathering and things like that. So big props to all those involved in that reporting. And I understand from Erin that that is actually going to help with the infrastructure reviews with in terms of stormwater capacity and where the weaknesses or strengths are in the system for both our grey water and our black water system. So thank you very much publicly saying that to the infrastructure team, seeing that I moan sometimes.
Okay, right, we've got 3 recommendations. Receive the report. Note the ICC response to the state of emergency on September 21 and notes the status update on the pipe renewals program. If someone moved Rhea, seconded Grant, put that, all those in favour.
Aye.
Against, that is carried. Thank you. Matt, first time.
Thanks, Matt.
You survived.
Right, that takes us to public excluded session. Can I have someone move, please? We go into public exclusion. I'll use the excuses Darren used before, the reasons for that.
Remember, it's an aye.
Aye. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.